Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again, and I want to make a bit of a video on the latest update that we just had, patch 3.2.1, I don't know what it is, but basically it did give a few cool things added to the game, starting with this Inpulsa's explosion. So the Inpulsa chest that gives a lightning-based explosion that we've been playing around with this league had a sort of bleed-based explosion before this update, and now as you can see they actually added a more lightning-based explosion to the effect, so it looks kind of blue and has a nice tingy blue explosion. And as such, I am now building a Reaver and Blade Flurry character, basically just a nice solid physical to elemental conversion meta Blade Flurry Reave character, so I could make use of this really cool new effect. Now my character doesn't really make use of the explosions much because it's just got a really good area already, and I'm not scaling the lightning damage quite that high. So for the most part, it just looks really cool, and the chest is somewhat practical for the character. However, as always, a Belly of the Beast is probably going to be better just to fill out life and all that. The main purpose of this character is to have cool as fuck blue explosions from the Inpulsa's chest. So by all means, I think it's something you want to shoehorn into a good build or two just to play around with, because it is a really nice effect and currently better than what I would say for me than most other Herald effects are, and it's a really big novelty for me at the moment. So it looks really cool, and the character I'm building should end up being pretty damn good, because I'm building it as a complete sort of meta slave with really strong main hand, a really strong shaper offhand to make use of the new shaped stats, and then of course Blade Flurry and Reave are two of the strongest melee skills out there at the moment, and I'm running Pathfinder going all kinds of flask bullshit. So similar to the Spectral Throw and Molten Strike character that I made back in Harbinger, which if you will recall was quite strong and probably one of the best characters I played that league, except this time around I'm just scaling pure physical into LE conversion as opposed to pure LE, and no projectile damage whatsoever, so it's just more physical and melee sort of damage to begin with. Overall, should end up being a really strong character. I'm going to sink quite a few exalts into it, and I'll show you what I've done so far for that. So it does have a 6 link, and I've made a really strong sword. Just plenty of good items to make it one of the best characters I could possibly play, and give you an example of what actually sinking some currency and some actual strong skills into the game will do at the moment. But for the most part, just doing it because I wanted to do the Inpulsa chest, and you'll probably see me use it a few more times throughout the league. So I'll show you guys a few of the other changes from the patch because they are somewhat significant, and also what I'm doing with this character. Now to start with, I wanted to go over one of the coolest changes, which was different effects for your character when different effects would happen with the Arborix bow. So if you recall, I made an Arborix character earlier in the league, and for 8 seconds you would get Iron Reflexes, and for 8 seconds you'd get a speed buff. You can see that the speed buff is just those swift lines around your character, while the Iron Reflexes one is this iron skin all over your character. And as you can see in this example here, I can and did take Iron Reflexes on the passive tree. When comboed with Arborix bow, it would give you the permanent iron skin character look. So that is something you could do certainly as a playstyle choice with the Arborix bow, and you can be permanently iron reflexed, and then you can look this way, and it really has a cool interaction with a lot of different microtransactions. And I messed around with this on stream the other day with just about every micro I could think of, and there were a lot of cool interactions, as I just said. So it was worth trying out, and definitely worth playing around with if you haven't done an Arborix build before, but currently it is disabled because there were some bugs with it. So it should be coming back sometime soon. However, right now I don't think it's actually in the game. Similar with the Volcanus and Dagger, which has another effect as well, and some other mace I think as well. But I didn't get a chance to play around with those, and they are currently disabled as well. However, this is pretty damn cool, and if it comes back, I recommend playing around with it. There were a few other bug fixes and changes, but the only other real important changes I want to go over are for Lightning Strike. It got a different visual and audio effect, because previously if you had a very substantial amount of of attack speed for your lightning strike, you would lag your computer pretty badly and drop a lot of frames. So it's got a very different effect to what it used to have, and if you haven't seen it yet, this is roughly what it looks like. So it just shoots out little lightning bolts and still has a big lightning bolt effect on the ground. So instead of just constantly chaining all the way across the screen, it's just a lightning bolt which separates between your different attacks. And it's still pretty intense when you get a lot of attack speed, but for the most part it is a bit easier on your computer. Probably a bit worse on the sensors though, because it is very bright, I feel, and does take over the screen a bit when you're actually attacking. Besides that, nothing's actually changed for Lightning Strike. It's still the same. You can still play around with it fairly effectively right now. If you use Ancestral Call early on, it feels really good, and otherwise just it has the same usual problems of colliding onto obstacles and being somewhat uncomfortable to use, especially exacerbated by something like Abysses right now, where it won't be going over those holes. So it's not the greatest league for the skill, but you know, it does work, and Ancestral Call does make it a bit nicer at times. We did then get a quick update on our map stash tab. So if you've bought one of these, this is an update to it where you now have, or if you haven't bought one of these even, it's an update where it's now color coded for the rarity or the tier of maps. So 1 to 5 is now white, 6 to 10 is now yellow, and of course 11 to 16 is now red. And the search function actually works, whereas it didn't used to. So if we search for temple, for example, it will now highlight the 3 categories that have temples. You can then click on them and you can actually see them very easily. So the search function is now actually active and definitely works a lot nicer than it previously did. And then I have one more change that I wanted to actually go over, and it also can show or have an example on the actual Inpulsa's chest, and that is the new advanced mod descriptions. So you have to actually enable them in your UI. So you go to the UI and then tick advanced mod descriptions. Now when you hold Alt over any item, you will see that the roles of the item, what it has, what it doesn't have, for suffixes, prefixes, and also it can separate certain suffixes and prefixes that previously would combine. So you can see if I hold Alt here, you can now distinguish that there's a major life roll on these gloves, a minor life roll. It then has the lightning resist, the cold resist, and the tier, which basically is how good your lightning or cold resist or any mod on there is. And of course the actual ranges that you can then roll in that category. So that's basically how a Divine Orb works. It'll just tell you that you can roll your, if you hit the Divine, you can roll your lightning resist from 12 to 17 in that category. So it's a very huge quality of life change. Instead of going alternatively outside of Path of Exile to certain websites, or even to Path of Exile website to check the roles, you can now do it in game, and it is pretty damn convenient, just as a huge quality of life for us. And likewise, you can see it on uniques over here. So on the Impulses over here, there are 4 different roles that can happen, and this one's not particularly good, roughly average, but you can see that it might be worth divining at this stage because it's not that good, and you can see all of the roles that we have and can get. It's pretty damn insane, and it's really nice for shaper mods as well. On my shaper scepter here, definitely actually shows you what you're doing with the shaper scepter with shaper mods and what exactly they do separately from everything else. So it is a huge convenience change, I believe, and something that most people should have enabled at this point. But that's pretty much all I want to talk about for the changes from the last patch. I'll just go over my character real quick for you guys if you want to start following along. He's only just now hit level 83, should hit probably 90 by tomorrow or something, and then start the end game. It's going to be a pretty overpowered character, I think, because it is a Pathfinder. It follows all the current classic rules of a strong character, building into Fizz and then Ellie conversion. And I did manage to roll a really strong sword for this one. This is just a Corsair I started rolling. I ended up getting not flaring, is it? Tempered, right? Tempered, and then the attack speed mod with alterations. I regaled this cruel mod, which then turns it into roughly a 430 DPS weapon with the right divining of it. So I divined it to have a lot of DPS, and then just crafted a crit and slammed it twice with exalts and got cold damage and bleed, which is completely meaningless stats. So that's a bit unfortunate, but it's still an absolutely insane weapon. Now, if you're wondering why I rolled a Corsair, I've somewhat recently figured out that having the requirements of the weapon with the attributes it has, so if I take this out, you can see that there's an 81 strength and a 100 dex requirement. Basically, it has a decent chance to roll physical things. So if you're just rolling a jeweled foil that has a 200 dex requirement, it almost always rolls elemental shit, because that's just seemingly how the game currently works. So I've tried to roll jeweled foils and foils a lot in the past. I'm talking 5, 10, probably 20,000 alterations throughout my lifetime, and I've never really made a strong physical foil. I've come close every now and again, but it really seems to be like a tough effort to do. Whereas this Corsair, or let's say Behemoth Maces, or all that kind of stuff, because it's more of a strength base, it seems to roll more physical, and it was just fairly easy rolling this one, fairly easy to get physical rolls and keep regaling, and I think that's just a bit of a smarter play, because a really strong Corsair is still going to be a really strong sword, even if it's not a foil. So I decided to do that, and obviously it's still got good attack speed, still got good accuracy bonus, so there's nothing wrong with the Corsairs, and the crit chance isn't huge, but it is enough to get a reliable crit chance in the end game regardless. And then of course, basically I wanted to do this type of character so I could also abuse a Shaper Scepter a bit for the first time. Mine's nothing too mind-blowing, but it is still much stronger than the previous offhands the game offered us. So with these types of things, I once again wanted to try and alt Regal, but I think this one I ended up Chaos spamming a bit as well. I don't think there's really a right answer there. Chaos spam will probably lead you to a better one quicker, but you can definitely still alt Regal and then maybe Exalt a few times too. Basically, what you're looking for is this gain 40% of physical damage as extra fire. Serves as basically another hatred aura onto just a stat stick. You can get multiple rolls of those onto one scepter, so you can just about double the DPS of your character from one good scepter if you roll it really well. But mine otherwise just has a bit of early damage and some crit multi, and it's on a sandbar base, on a shaped scepter, so you want at least eye level 80 for this type of shenanigan to work. Eye level 83 to be at its absolute maximum for rolls if you want to go into doing something like this. You can go a lot crazier, but I think this is pretty crazy already and doesn't need to be much better. Now besides that, I'm just using my usual Tomb Fist with 2 sockets so I can get some Intimidate, life and some physical, maybe some attack speed on crit, a belt with some life and elemental damage on attacks, just another pretty generic abyssal jewel, and there's not really too much else to mention. I'll probably go over the character in full in the next sort of video when I've got everything fully completed, because I'm still building. I'm still using an Aerion ring, still using my leveling mask, and going to replace my jewelry in total, I'd say, and maybe even this flask for a Lion's Roar, maybe get a Taste of Hate. I'm still going to look into a lot of different things, so the character's by no means complete, and we're using an Impulses just for that really cool effect of the blue effect when you kill things, but it also does give you some good damage when you shock recently, some increased effective shock, and it's got some life. And if you want to know, just before we finish this video, we do run currently Reaver, increased crit strikes, Fizz to Lightning for half of my conversion, multi-strike, melee fizz, and LE damage with attacks. If you've only got a 5 link, you're probably dropping crit strikes for this setup, but you could potentially drop something else as well, like melee fizz if you're really low on crit. Now, my other half of the conversion comes from here as well. So I have 90% fizz converted at the moment, not quite 100, but it is good enough to get most of our damage scaling going. And you can see the passive tree is just pretty normal, I think. Getting a bunch of crit, some life, and some damage nodes as well. Now, Pathfinder, simply because this node over here is really good for penetration and flask sustain, and then ultimately it's really nice to have buffed flasks and have some sustain, and it makes all of these flasks just a bit stronger and just a bit easier to sustain. So Pathfinders, for me, are notoriously some of the best and smoothest characters I play. If you've never tried one, this is definitely something you should get into. A Fizz to LE conversion Pathfinder with the right amount of currency investment and the right skills is going to be a very, very strong character indeed. I will just show you before I go. This is currently my Blade Flurry potential DPS without having fixed too much in my character yet, and it's going to potentially go a lot higher, especially if you want to shove Abyssus into your build, but for now I don't think I'm going to do that. Anyway guys, that was the video about some patch updates and some cool stuff happening in the game, and a bit of a teaser for the character. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.